I can honestly say that 30 years ago, we had, in my experience, there was no one who was doing, work overseas. I mean, or international research from our hospital. It was very, very rare that it was done. It could have been done, but we just didn't hear about it. We didn't review it. We didn't have to think about it. We didn't have to think about, the issues. And, gradually over the years, we've seen more and more investigators as the world has gotten smaller, and we have more cooperative efforts and needs for cooperative efforts and needs to have trials in different places of the same drugs, or the needs to explore issues that are very pertinent to a particular culture. And our investigators being very, interested in collaborating. So we've seen a real growth in that particular area, as everyone else, and also a huge number of challenges in doing that, and especially in dealing within pediatric areas as well. It's not as easy. As I've gotten more involved and I've gotten to be able to go to other cultures and to teach, it's very, very, very complex. And you often talk to people internationally, and they all want to be like the United States. What do you do? They all want to be, but when you start really sort of pulling apart the research and the ethics issues, it doesn't match up. It just doesn't match up. And so this desire for everyone to want to understand, to follow the regs, it can be very, very, very complex. One of the interesting things that recently happened is we spend a lot of time in the United States talking about research-related injuries. Who's going to pay research-related injuries? And in certain countries now, there's certain mandates, about that. In certain countries, they don't have insurance like we do. There's more socialized medicine, so it's not a particular, issue. Another example is paying a research participant. I mean, that's like unheard of. I went to a lecture this past summer in Turkey, and I had brought some cases. They all wanted cases, and so I had been talking to some people before we were going to do cases. And this idea that you would get paid was that doesn't happen. And so here I was, with my cases, having to change things, at the very last minute, because those were not issues, and payment for research injuries were not issues. And so it's very, very, very complex. And I think we have to rely. I'm so glad that there's so much more effort to have international countries do to help them learn to think on their own. I think that's the best that we can do, to raise the issues and have them think and solve their own problems, and think about best ways of addressing things. Because time and time again, our IRB will review something that's international, and we'll just get feedback that we are just so way off base. That's just not an issue. Another example where sometimes it was, so we were reviewing a protocol for one of the resource poor countries, and I forget it was one in Africa, and there was all this information in the protocol about maintaining communication with people via cell phones now, and phone. And so if our IRB sat around and go, this is research poor, how are they going to do this? People don't have phones. Well, they all do have phones. I mean, they may not have a lot of other things, but in the setting we were at, they all did have phones. And so we spent a lot of time talking about how are you going to do this, and it turns out, after we really got information that, they may not have other types of things, but they do have phones. And that is the way that people, communicated. And it is rather inexpensive for people to have phones. So, it goes both ways, where we think, here we have such technology and a resource poor country would not, and it didn't go that way. And then other things that, go the opposite way. And it gets complex with children and issues of, certainly of maturity and assent. We're constantly learning that in a lot of countries, a 12-year-old mom can bring their child in and be cared for, and they don't need parental permission. And I've just learned you can't assume anything, and you really need, need the depth there.